I've read Marx. I've read Engels. I've read Das Kapital.
The world is run by Trotskyists.
Aaron, one thing that's great about our two countries is that we have the freedom of speech in this country. Can you imagine living in a country where if you spoke out against the government, that they'd violently crack down on you and they would just arrest all peaceful people, and then they would make up things like some people felt uncomfortable, which is all you need as a justification to go in and send in the riot police. But
Jews on campus felt
wow.
unsafe.
I mean, can you imagine?
And so we're going to send in the riot police to shoot rubber bullets at the Jewish students who were protesting a genocide.
Jews for Peace is anti-Semitic. I read it on Fox News. All right. I mean, isn't this just crazy? Like, it's like Jews for Peace is like and they're going after clubbing them. And it's almost like I'm being gaslit every day when I turn on the news, and you keep seeing this dumb shit over and over. And it's like, no, this isn't happening. At the same time too, we had, there's a Confederate holiday. I don't know, when the losers all get together and down the South here, all the people who wish slavery was back again, but a bunch of maybe about 20 neo-Nazis or 30, whatever group they're called. But they show up, they march in the street with a police escort. Nothing happens. You don't see Biden talking about them. You don't see Nancy Pelosi. You don't see nothing. It's crazy. Like literal neo-Nazis get like police escorts everywhere. But some kids sit on a lawn that they paid to go to. They're funding the school, and then they're like violently beaten up by the thugs in blue who have like a second grade education. Like, I mean, the police is made up of like the dumbest people who, were either bullies or bullied themselves. And this is how they're going to get revenge on everybody.
I don't know if you saw that. They got attacked by like a Freikorps-esque like proto-fascist mob of Zionists with rods and sticks and fireworks. They were launching fireworks into the crowd. There, bear mace. It was insane.
Yeah.
And then after they were done, the police then went out and cleared out the encampment. So UCLA encampment's been cleared out for today. We'll see how the students rebound from this.
That's so strange. Yep. I think what's going to happen.
I wasn't active.
You weren't around. You weren't active in Occupy, were you? You weren't, right?
Like a little bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If it wasn't for the Iraq War and 9/11, I probably wouldn't have had anything to do with any of these movements at all. But holy moly. Well, also we're voting. If you heard about the bill that's going on in America, the House passed a thing saying that comparing Israel to Nazis or anything like that can get your school defunded or something.
Yep.
Something stupid, but like it was bipartisan, way to go. Jesus. Like the free speech people, even the Republicans who spent like all of 2019 talking about free speech for campus Nazis and everyone. But now if you say like, what I think Israel's doing is comparable to Nazi Germany.
Any criticism of Israel.
There goes your fund. They're threatening funding.
And it passed with flying colors in the House, right?
Yeah. But it was maybe like, maybe I think out of,
it's insane. Like
I forget the votes, like 219 to 91, and more Republicans voted against it than the Democrats.
It does.
Yeah,
it does, but it doesn't shock me.
I mean, it makes both sides look bad because even the Republican, like I said, for the Republicans who cried about free speech for neo-Nazis in Charlottesville and white supremacists and stuff. But now all of them, even like some MAGA people I work with, were like, weren't we talking about free speech a while? Like, it is resonating with them too. Only like 30% of the Republican Party.
Yeah, that's right. HR 6090.
Man, they have committed.
It expands the definition of anti-Semitism to include criticism of Israel. So this is how the Democrats are going to win in November. Obviously.
I have it. I can play it, but Joe Biden today gave a press conference talking about it. Yep. Let me see. Let me do the share screen here.
Don't forget that.
Share sound. There we go. Okay. Optimize for video clip. All right, I will do that as well. Okay, here we are. All right, let's see here. Let me move you. So here we go. All right. So I'm just gonna let this play out a little bit here, but let's see.
Yeah.
There we go. President
This is
Joe
the
Brendan here is
strategy
going
to
to
win
talk a
over
little bit
youths.
about the protests, and let's see it. That's right. And here we go. Now, Joe Biden is not against protests, but let's see. Let's see what he's going to do.
The first is the right to free speech and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld. We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to
You're listening to The Left Opposition on Spotify. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is just me and Chris. And on the program today, we are talking, of course, about the ongoing campus occupations. Last week we discussed lessons from Occupy and Black Lives Matter and how this is so much of a higher level, and what the students have been doing and accomplishing has been absolutely incredible. And it's also May Day, so happy May Day to you, Chris.
Hey, happy May! I know it's good. It's May 1st. It's
okay.
not May 2nd. We're not
May
recording May
yesterday.
2nd. May Day hasn't happened yet. This is.
I got to spend it at
okay, fine. We're doing this. Well, okay,
local,
fine. It was
there's
yesterday.
a Workers'
Fine.
Arts Heritage Center downtown of Hamilton, and there was a big barbecue put on by the Communist Party of Canada. My local constituency, my member of provincial parliament, Rep. Sarah Jama, she came out. They attempted to eject her from the legislature for wearing a keffiyeh because it was seen as a political statement. So I guess there's no politics allowed in the legislature. I don't know. No, that's crazy.
No, that's what you don't want to do.
In honor of the inaugural May Day episode of The Left Opposition, I thought I'd read a short excerpt from Lenin on May Day. Comrade workers, May Day is coming, the day when the workers of all lands celebrate their awakening to a class-conscious life, their solidarity in the struggle against all coercion and oppression of man by man, the struggle to free the toiling millions from hunger, poverty, and humiliation. Two worlds stand facing each other in this great struggle, the world of capital and the world of labor, the world of exploitation and slavery, and the world of brotherhood and freedom. Lenin is and always shall be like the absolute GOAT.
Yeah, I would put him down there. I call myself a Marxist Leninist as well because I'm a big fan of him.
I mean, so, I would too if the phrase
that phrase has been co-opted by some people. I used to call myself that once. Like, I mean, I am, but like, because boy, does that change. Like I'm sure there are anarchists who call themselves libertarians, but they can't anymore, like because a bunch of I can say jack off on here, but like a bunch of jagoffs took the name and now it's been wrecked. So now it has to be like, now you call yourself something else, or you call yourself a Bolshevik Leninist. We're desperate for a cool name without someone ruining it.
Bolshevik Leninist is not a bad
Speaking
attempt,
of ruining
actually,
things.
And instead of using the word Trotskyist, just Bolshevik Leninist.
Right?
Not bad. Not a bad. Yeah, I kind of dig it.
It is a cool sounding thing, right? And then because you're not thinking of, unfortunately, Jackson Hinkle or I don't know, Nicholas Shershetsky. Like you're not thinking of those names immediately. But that's all. All right. So I have a little clip here. Now in America we have a president. His name is Joe Biden, and he's responding to some things, and this will lead a segue into. Oh yeah. Also, we should have probably run up for the intro. We have two guests from the Independent Socialist Group coming. They're in the Zoom meeting here, but I have to pretend I don't notice them. So it's going to be good. Very good. Thank you for staying silent. But I'm going to play this. This might lead into something we might talk to them about. So it's about the Middle East. So Joe Biden, I'm going to do a share screen. God help me if I get this right, but I'm not going to do optimize for video clip. But okay, I'm going to play this little clip here. And it's only short because Joe Biden gives you the answer. But today he was asked, have all these protests, are they reaching you? Are they making an effect? So Joe Biden just only a few hours ago gave a response, so I'll play it really
Did you
quickly
reconsider any
here.
of the policies
All right,
with
here we
regard
go.
to the region?
No. Thank you.
Mr. President, do you think the National Guard should
Easy, done. No.
Yeah, that was it. That was there. There you go.
Mr. Biden, can
Yep.
you do
There,
anything for the youth of America?
Yeah, that was it. So I'm just. Are you trying to lose this election on purpose? That would be really what I want to know. Like, if you could answer, like, yeah, I'm purposely trying to rig the election so I don't win, so I can alienate youth votes and possibly do it and go down in the polls further. But yep. So that is. So there he is. So, leading up to that, here we have our guests, Jacob and Jeff from the Independent Socialist Group. Hello, everybody. Little background here. Now, Jeff and I, we do know each other. Now, I'm sure lots of people who listen to this podcast are easily fans also of Socialist Alternative Radio. If you were in the Tufts University, Medford, Somerville area, and you were listening to 91.5 WMFO, which I know Aaron is a huge fan of before he even became a socialist. Jeff and I were ruling the airwaves. Jeff, when was this? 2011 to 13-ish?
Well, the show did predate you a little bit.
It did.
Yeah, sorry about that. So
No.
yeah, I don't remember the exact time frame. It was on for a long time.
What, right?
Maybe
Yeah.
like I don't know, 8 years or something. I don't know.
I'm trying to think. Like, I remember. Now, this was a terrestrial radio thing on a college campus, and I lived far away. I had to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to beat traffic, drive down to Tufts. We did a 2-hour gig together. Then I went to work late by 30 minutes, and I'd make up an excuse. They later fired me. Yeah, I guess showing up to work 45 minutes late for a couple of years, I guess, will get you in trouble with some employers. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. So I honed in my skills, and it was great.
I had the same experience. Late to work. Up
Where were you
early,
late?
late to work. Didn't get fired yet, though. So.
Congrats. Jem has a union. I didn't. So that would be it too. That might have been a helping thing there too. But all right. So just an article here. I'll share it as if you don't know. But so now I know it seems like ancient history, but this article came out, I think, like 2.5 weeks ago. We have to think far back to remember when Iran and Israel were trading fire. Not that any of us support Iran in any way. They're a reactionary fundamentalist regime that has the blood of a lot of communists on its hand from the 70s. But Israel blew up their embassy in Damascus, which, as far as I'm concerned, or anyone else is concerned, that's an attack on someone else's country. I remember learning about embassies in the 3rd grade that's a foreign country, it's an attack. But yeah, it's a thing, where people do business and try to talk. But so that went off, and then Iran, after finally said, they even said, like, we're gonna, like, never before in history has there been like, we're gonna shoot missiles on this day, we're letting you know when it's gonna happen, it's coming this way, and that's it. And they shot a bunch of drones and missiles and stuff. And, Israel was claiming 99% interception, but I think that number is actually only at 80%. The number, I mean, it's hard to believe that Israel would lie about anything, but yeah, so that happened. Right. And then, true. And then they just bombed the area anyway that you just ran to. But, right. Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to give an update too on the war in Gaza. So I just got these numbers today. So for all of us in the West, especially us Americans who are funding this war, we just gave, I think, another $24 billion to the genocide going on. And the numbers look like this. 77,816 Palestinians have been wounded. 34,000 have been killed, mostly by American-made and funded weaponry, including 14,873 children. 31 of those children have died from malnutrition and dehydration. 143 journalists and media workers have been killed by the Israeli occupation forces, and over 2 million Palestinians have been displaced from their home. So that's what's going on right now. That vote that just happened was pretty, I mean, I don't know why we're surprised, but, here we are, this many people. And of course, more people are probably going to die at the hands of our taxpayer dollars. So, so your group, the ISG, put out an article that I did like, if I could cue it up here. So, let's see, a couple of questions I have here too. And this part I liked a lot. I'll put this in the chat too. All right. So I'll just read it out loud because I'm already yapping. From the article, and the article is titled Iran strikes Israel. Middle East crisis escalates. And this is the part I wanted to discuss a little bit. The relative weakening of the U.S. position globally has seen it being challenged by other powers and is unable to enforce its wishes as it did in the immediate period after the collapse of the Soviet Union. This challenge has been driven by the rise of China, but also by other states around the world like India and Brazil being prepared to follow their own interests, something also seen among the Middle Eastern oil producers. The Western imperialist powers are facing the Chinese and Russian regimes' use of anti-colonial language in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America, and puts parts of Asia to win influence. And I like this for all you World War II fans. If you're watching the week-by-week thing, you might like this. But in a similar way that the Japanese imperialism used anti-colonial propaganda against the British, Dutch, French empires during World War II. One thing that we've seen, and I hope, Jacob and Jeff, I hope you've never heard of patriotic socialism. I hope, have you? Okay, you're laughing, so I know you
Heard of it. Yeah.
Oh God. Have you heard of this person? Jackson Hinkle, have you heard the name?
You mentioned it earlier in the podcast. It sounded familiar.
Yeah, he's awful. So some of these people you'll see, some of the Stalinists, some of these patriotic socialists who are soon going to be fascist in about a year. They believe in this multipolar world. You hear it all the time. Well, anyone who's rivaling the United States is good. So, Russia, China, the rise of the BRICS, this is all a good counterweight to American hegemony. One thing I would say, and we always kind of say on the show too, is that Russia after 1991, and I know we're some experts, is actually no longer socialist. Not at all. China, there's a debate some might have. I think a lot of us, I feel that the Chinese Communist Party in 2024 is a mass bourgeois party. But at the same time, I can say that the 1949 Chinese Revolution was a great thing. But right now, not anymore. What's your take on the people who might say, well, China and Russia, these are good. It's good that they're challenging it. Do you think that you agree with them, or is it like this is just swapping out one oppressor for another? What do you take?
Yeah, I agree with what you're describing, and I run into this a little bit, mostly online, not in real life so much, but people defending any opposition to U.S. imperialism as just, and also extending that beyond the reality of what those countries are like. So yeah, Russia still socialist somehow. Yep. North Korea somehow is socialist. China is somehow still socialist, communist. None of the above are true once you look into it a little bit. And China, I agree exactly how you phrased it. There's a debate going on. I'm sort of with it's state capitalism basically, and defined as capitalism with a strong state element, which waxes and wanes depending on what's going on. But I think a really good discussion about the state, looking at State and Revolution by Lenin and many other works from a Marxist perspective. Capitalism doesn't exist 1 second without a strong state. So we're talking about a question of degrees, really, in terms of what kind of state and the power it wields under capitalism. And the Chinese state certainly has a lot of elements of repression and economic direction and so on that is not absent, as we're seeing with the student protests here in the US. So they're not exactly the same types of capitalism, if you want to call it that, but the fundamentals are the same. And China, if you get into what's going on the ground with how people work, what social benefits they have or don't have anymore, it's clearly a capitalist dominated system, but with a strong state character. But you can bring that analogy down to by analogy, you can bring that down to in the current struggle, people supporting reactionary Arab regimes, despite the fact that Jordan helped Israel in the recent attack from Iran. There's things happening in Saudi Arabia at any given moment, and other countries in the Middle East that are socialists, international socialists, we wouldn't support at all. And the question of supporting Hamas as a form of leading resistance to the Israeli attack and the Israeli regime. Like you mentioned, Chris, in passing, you'd think the left would have learned this lesson after supporting the Stalinists, mostly supporting the fundamentalists in Iran in the 1979 Iranian Revolution, then turning around from that, just right after that, incredible repression against the communist movement, the socialist movement in Iran, deadly murders and so on, repression. If you ever read that graphic novel or see the film Persepolis, it touches on that. That was actually our actual movie that people saw in the theaters in the 90s, I guess it was, or maybe early 2000s.
I think early 2000s. Yeah, maybe.
So that's a really important point. Yeah, that's our position is that, we basically have we basically believe that the national question for shorthand that Lenin developed and others is really a crucial component of Marxism and Marxist methodology. So, we do support self-determination of people and minorities in countries being oppressed by bourgeois majorities. And that gets into sometimes there's a bourgeois, leadership to the countries that are trying to free themselves and have their own nations. There's a whole list of them now, everything from, Quebec to, the Catalan movement. You could just go on and on all over the world. And that might be in the future of the United States at some point, who knows? But that's something we would support, but in a critical way. We would be trying to, we would support the right self-determination. We have no allegiance to capitalist borders. Those were constructed for capitalists. To enforce their system and the strong nation state again, like we were talking about earlier. So we would support not socialist, self-determination movements, but only up to a point. We at the same time would be, hey, these leaders are really not, they have their own interests in mind, not the interests of the working class. And we sort of turn around the way Lenin and others talked about, where you'd support the right to self-determination for a new nation state, but at the same time fighting for internationalism. Sounds like a contradiction, but it's one of those Marxist contradictions, part of the dialectic. So we would be in support of fighting for self-determination of oppressed peoples, but at the same time organizing internationally, organizing at a working class level to pull people away from nationalism. So it sounds like a tall order, and it is, capitalism, the word I don't like to use much, but it's hegemony in terms of, ideas, in terms of propaganda, in terms of values, even down in getting deeper into society and among the working class as well. It's hard to break people from a nationalist standpoint, but events tend to do that, and to weaken those ties at certain points in history. So sorry for going on for so long. I'll leave it at that.
That was good. Now we were hoping for a full answer. So that's good. That's awesome. So very good too. I like that a lot. Because I remember.
By the way, Chris, can I jump in with one thing? Sorry. Yeah. I said I was done and I jumped in. I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right, go for it.
The article is actually from the Committee for Works International and their website, socialistworld.net. We do print a lot of their stuff on our website in the States, ISG, Independent Socialist Group website. So I just wanted to that's a little fact thing. We also have our own material published here. This article we've used in discussions and branch meetings and so on.
Yep, I was about to show off my. Oh, wait. You mean? Yep, I got. Yep, still got it.
Well, that's our U.S. paper.
Some radical handed this to me yesterday. I don't know who, but he looked like a Bolshevik. That's all I can tell. I don't know. Place is swimming with them, but
we still do the printed paper as well as the website and
all right,
Instagram and everything
all
else.
Right, let me just side note. Here we go. We're with some younger people. Jeff, you and I are now, we got some younger people with us, but the newspaper, this is important. Why a newspaper? Because I get this a lot, like, why are you handing out a newspaper? Why do you print a newspaper? Because it's not free. Obviously, you have to spend resources and money, but why? Because, you do have Instagram and MySpace and in email. I don't know. I don't really follow technology. This, like I said, you can see me operate, but why still a newspaper? Why not just go completely digital?
Jacob, you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, Jacob. Yeah. You want to
Yeah,
handle?
as the young person in the room,
Oh
I
yeah,
guess.
you're a young kid. All right, go for it.
How do you do, fellow kids? Quarter of a century old, but
You want to drink some Jolt soda after and talk about the 411? I don't know. All right.
I have a follow-up question. Is like, why is it that like Trotskyist organizations are the ones that are notorious for like the newspaper stereotype? Like, where does that come from?
so that one always confuses me because like other groups have it. I think the Communist Party for a long time, I think they mostly went digital now, but they had a newspaper forever and they were nowhere near Trotskyist, of course. And then you can see other like groups like I think yeah, like DSA technically even has a print
Workers
publication.
World has a newspaper still. I've seen them.
Am-
I don't.
yeah,
They're not
the
try-
Amazon
what-
Labor Union
I'm not even
has
gonna. I don't
a
know what
newspaper.
Workers World is, but
Wow.
And the reason I brought it up is because like at the May Day rally yesterday, the Communist Party of Canada, they're certainly not Trotskyist, but they have stacks of newspapers called People's Voice.
Wow.
And we had a good conversation. The guy was telling me, he's like, hey, next month's issue is going to have there's a light rail transit going up in my city, and the guy was like, yeah, like our mayor just voted to allow all the labor that's going to be running the LRT to be privatized. And I'm like, yeah, I know, it's bullshit. And so he's telling me about an article that he's writing about how it needs to be expropriated under democratic workers' control, and all rail and all public transport needs to be nationalized. I'm like, okay, this sounds word for word for the article that I wrote for my organization, but except I didn't have it in a printed newspaper. So it was like a bizarre reverse situation. So he kind of lit up when I said, yeah, I write for Marxist workers. And it was like word for word of like imagine that we had like the exact same demands.
oh, wow, maybe things are getting better. I don't know. I know I don't know much about the CPC, but historically, I'm gonna guess not
They
good.
run
But
candidates
maybe
in
they're getting
bourgeois
better.
elections.
I'm guessing
and they get
but,
500 votes every time. Like it's they're not yeah, they're nice people, don't get me wrong. Every time I've run
right.
into them, they're super chill.
No.
That's all right.
Well,
Yeah,
well, why
why
the
the paper
paper,
though?
though?
Let's get back to the
Why the paper? Yeah, I know. I was going to get back to that. I know we got. There's going to be a lot of digression with us. I'm sorry about it, but yes. Why the? Thank you, Jeff. Jeff, you want to take over here and just get the thing right the ship here? But yes.
Well, Jacob, jump
Could
in.
you
I'll
answer
probably-
Jeff's
I'll-
question about the newspaper?
I'll probably leave some stuff out, but basically the shorthand is that it's a very good thing to have at a meeting or a rally, rather than showing someone your phone or opening up your laptop. It's good to have a printed copy of a newspaper. Also, I think it makes more of an impression. People can read it later. On the internet, you just get lost in a million little corners, and that's the primary reason. But also, it tends to focus people more. Writing for a paper, it's still some sort of it's not really a material thing, but well, actually, it is. There's still it seems a little more serious. So the writing, I think, is taken more seriously, and also permanence. Just to have the paper, in print version to have laying around to look at and stuff. Also, this is not an official statement at all, but
you heard it here first. Left opposition. Here we go, Jeff. Drop a bombshell.
I'm just saying have consumed a lot of science fiction, and I have a healthy mistrust of the internet, and it's already happening in a lot of countries, shutting off portions of the internet, slowing it down, and so on. We're ready to go with leaflets and print copies of papers at any time to avoid whatever censorship pops up, as it is more and more. I see utility for it.
Yeah.
I think also
Want anything else to that?
yeah, I mean there is also the point to be made that I think a lot of young people are gravitating towards physical media. Like we're seeing a resurgence of like vinyl records and even like CDs to some degree. I think people like having that.
I've been seeing cassette tapes make a comeback too, which is even weirder. They're not even good quality.
Yeah.
God, but all right, Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people appreciate having a newspaper because, I mean, I always find it difficult when I'm writing articles. I think, oh, I saw that post on social media. I should try to look into that more, see what it was talking about, try to find references for it, and then I'm digging back for articles. I mean, I remember stories from Jeff that like socialists used to keep like binders where you just have like news clippings so that you could go back and reference them later, because it's such a pain to go back and try to find a website that you read
Yeah.
like a while ago. Like I'll sit there on Google for hours sometimes when I'm researching for an article, just trying to find the citation that I was looking for. Uh, and then, like, as Jeff got into, there's a certain permanence to it. And I think that encourages better quality of proofreading for a lot of the material. Like,
Yeah.
you have to be willing to put out a paper that is somebody can reach back and look at. Like, you can edit websites at any time, but the amount of quality that you have to put into a newspaper, because you know that this can easily come up to haunt me, even if the internet gets wiped tomorrow in some solar flare or EMP attack or whatever.
Would all be, I know. And then all would have left is the newspaper, which is it. So Trotsky is ready for the EMP nightmare. We're ready. That's
But also
good.
that
I like
original
that. That's
point,
going to be,
you know, if you're at a demo, I've literally opened up the paper and said, boom, this is what we're doing. This is something you might be interested in. I didn't do that with you, Chris. I figured you'd go back and read it.
I did. You did. I know. I saw you were doing well. I mean, you sold me a paper. So like, I got it. You know, I was going to buy it anyway, but yeah,
It's a
I know
tool.
that was it.
It's a good tool.
It is. And I think for me, why I like it too, because you get that. Oh, you got them newspapers. And it's like, well, it shows that like you're a serious organization, that you got your shit together. You know, like, oh, you have a newspaper and it's got articles. Oh, you guys are, versus like, yeah, I'm just some guy on, you know, check. Here's a QR code. Scan it. No, stand back 3 feet. No, move closer. You know, no, it's just, here's the newspaper. You look like you got it together, and that impresses me. Way back when, you know, what made me join Social Alternative that Jeff and I were in, someone handed me a flyer, and it was, you know, it was a very well written small flyer. And I'm like, and there was a conference, and everyone, and you know, everyone had it together. And I'm like, well, this seems professional. All right, I'll check it out. You know, that was it. So that was when I moved to joining an organization.
Even leaflets are suspect now, and that's been going on for decades. I mean, I remember the first time someone said, keep it, save a tree, you know. And I'm from a place where there's lots of trees, and kind of I you know, was at the J paper mill strike in 1987 and talking to paper workers, etc. I mean, you don't have to worry so much about leaflets depleting forests. So you know that
they'll grow them back.
Yeah.
So I
So
remember, like, electronic is more wasteful because you need energy and you have to burn energy to recharge your phone versus a tree.
right, exactly.
I remember this was Adam Ruins Everything. I don't know. That's on Netflix.
But yesterday,
it's a good show.
Yesterday was like, there was some people that wouldn't take a leaflet at a May Day demonstration, and I actually, after all these years, still get angry about that. It's silly, but I did. And
What's
so
wrong with you people?
So you know, I kept leafleting, and then I handed some leaflets over to a new comrade who's like, what, 18 years old or something. And they were just like, everyone would take a leaflet from them. They put me to shame.
I know.
It was great.
Yeah, these kids today. Good. Yeah. I know. I even took a leaflet. He seemed really nice. He's like, "Do you want a flyer?" I'm like, "All right."
Well, that was
kid,
Harper,
you know?
and Harper got arrested at Northeastern as part of the, what was it, over 100 people that got arrested last week.
And Emerson?
Their court date was today, actually.
Wow. Thank God. Wow. Finally, the state's arresting people for war. Oh, wait, no, they're not arresting them for war.
Those
crimes.
peaceful
it's the people
encampments until the
protesting the
police
war that
show
get
up.
arrested.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank God. Oh my God. All right. Second thing from the article I'd like to talk about too here. And let me just copy and paste it here for the chat so y'all can read it. And I'll just read this one too. The Biden administration both fears what Netanyahu's far-right government will do, and at the same time wants to preserve Israel's role as Western imperialism's key ally for the region. Facing growing international revulsion at their hypocrisy, condemning Russian attacks on Ukraine, but fundamentally supporting and arming the Israeli destruction of Gaza, the Western powers have seized upon the Iranian attack in a propaganda counteroffensive, downplaying the coverage of the Gaza war and the April 1st Damascus attack. In this, the Western propagandists have stressed the oppressive and often brutal Iranian regime, something which is true, but it ignores the West and the Western allies like the highly repressive and Saudi Gulf regimes. so much on that. I just want to go. The first thing I see here too, that I really like too. I mean, you can watch on YouTube tons of clips when Russia bombed a hospital, or if they bombed a school. There was a press conference. I saw Secretary of State Anthony Blinken get out. How terrible, how awful Putin is. He's bombing civilians. And one bomb, it killed 23 people, Ukrainians. Terrible. That is bad. Civilians. They bombed a hospital, killing civilians. Terrible. And I agree. Anthony Blinken's right. But you have Israel bomb one hospital with a hypersonic missile, kills 500 people. They lie about it. And then later on, they go, well, maybe there was Hamas in there. And then they bomb 24 other hospitals. Crickets. I mean, I like how that article, because it's just like I said, I feel like I'm being gaslit every day I turn on the news and you see, like, they're talking about Russia did something bad, and Russia was wrong to invade Ukraine. Like, what Putin's doing is bad, and that should be condemned. But Israel does it 300 times worse, and now if you point that out, you're an anti-Semite. What's your take on this? Like, it just
Fine. What's the
Well, I mean,
problem?
Go ahead, Jacob. Sorry. Or Aaron.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh, it
Russian
was
cats
so
were
dumb.
banned. I
People
remember
pouring out,
this.
like,
Yeah, all
vodka
sorts
and
of weird
shit,
stuff.
like, it was
Yeah.
Stupidest reaction.
Right. Solzhenitsyn. Yeah, that guy. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, connecting it to the student protests, right? When Russia invaded Ukraine, all sorts of universities jumped to cut ties with Russian research programs. I mean, I believe I would have to fact check this or whatever, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And so, universities were willing to divest from Russia. I think in some instances, even programs that weren't military programs, right? Just civilian, Russian literature things. Funny anecdote, kind of, but I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but the Solzhenitsyn, the guy that wrote Google. Yeah. So he has a institute named out after him that's based out of Worcester, and he historically was, when he was alive, was promoting Russian annexation of Ukraine. But nobody in Worcester seemed to care that his institute promoting his work was still in Worcester. They just kind of tried to stay under the radar. Meanwhile, we were getting criticized for some of our positions on the war. But anyway, the point is that without that tangent, when Russia invaded Ukraine, you saw immediate divestment by all sorts of universities and even some of these big corporations like fast food chains and others. And so now when protesters are calling for the same divestment, and in many cases, they're mainly calling for divestment from the actual military research programs between US and Israeli universities that are making this entire invasion and occupation possible between weapons and surveillance and other aspects of it. It's suddenly controversial to divest. And I mean, it really is a double standard. I went out to the MIT encampment, I think last Saturday, and they had speakers there talking about how MIT did divest from all these Russian programs, shut them down. And then now it's the people calling for the same standard to be applied when Israel's committing war crimes.
I think the media is lying to us or exaggerating stuff. I'm sitting down for this.
And the MIT, just as a tangent, the MIT encampment, I guess some of the media had an effect on me because I was expecting to see anti-Semitism or chaos or violence, but the MIT encampment when I was there was very well put together, very disciplined. They knew what they were doing. I think in a lot of ways, the movement's tactics have been sharpened by the lessons of BLM, Occupy, all of that. And I mean, it just kind of shattered the whole. I mean, obviously, I think there are some different situations, more escalation of things with police violence, and then UCLA. I think I heard it was counter protesters violently storming the encampments. But a lot of these encampments are, if you actually go to them,
I got a clip coming up about. I got a clip from 1986. All right, Jeff, you're going to do a good one. Do this lead in for me. I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah. I mean, I was expecting like chants of kill all Jews or something, but then you have Jewish speakers talking about how they were actually facing anti-Semitism from counter protesters at these events. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
There is, but based on the article, there is something that occurred to me. There's the article is basically saying Israel is a surrogate for U.S. imperialism without using that word surrogate. That's in a lot of CWI and ISG material. It's not a original thought or anything. In fact, I grew up, once I became a socialist, I kept hearing, or in certain places, Israel, the unsinkable aircraft carrier of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East. And that is, well, very true, right? Well, it's not quite that straightforward because that's an incredibly important thing to understand, Israel's role in the Middle East. I think comrades here understand that. But for anyone just finding out about that, it's a long, bloody history that didn't just start with after October 7th, obviously. And so that's really important to know. And we're talking about billions, maybe perhaps trillions of dollars over time. And resistance to that has been many faceted, with socialists formerly having a lot of influence in resistance to that, to Israeli occupation and so on. But what I'm getting at is now U.S. imperialism has another surrogate in Ukraine. Of course, that's usually framed as NATO, but the U.S. dominates NATO when you get right down to it.
Excellent point.
So that's another
the thing too,
surrogate,
and I like that
right on the
because
border of Russia and all that kind of stuff. We could get into
in
that
a weird mirror
if we want
universe,
to.
I remember we were talking about
But
this
things
previously,
are
but kind of like
one
the
thing about that
relationship
article. I
is
agree with
kind
the
of
article,
similar.
but I think
Stay with me
I
because
think
this is
it's
going to be
worth
weird. But
a
like
kind of subtle
how
point of
Cuba
how
in
much
like
is
the
theater and how
80s
much
and the
is reality
70s in the Soviet
with
Union, where
Biden
the Cuba
and
was like,
company
we're going to go to
opposing
Angola. We're going to
Netanyahu
join the fight. And the
or
Soviet Union's like, no, no,
some of
you're not going
Netanyahu's
there. No, no, no,
policies.
don't do that.
At any given
And the
moment,
Cuba's
I think
like,
that has to be
okay, we went to
examined
Angola. We
because
bought a bunch of troops. We're going to fight the
what the
apartheid
propaganda
regime.
that we
And then
hear,
the
especially
Soviet
during
Union
an
was like,
election
all
year,
right, fine, you're
might
there.
not all
We'll
match the
back you
reality,
up.
and
We'll
I
give
don't
you
think
what you
does
need.
actually match the
That's like
reality
the
behind the scenes.
like the good
U.S.
version of
imperialism
like
probably
what's
sees
happening, but this is
Netanyahu
the
as
evil version where
a
like
risk
Israel is Cuba, like
and
we're
a little
gonna do
unstable.
genocide, and America's like,
But
no, don't do
fundamentally, it's
genocide.
not
And they're like,
changing
okay,
their
we'll fund
support
genocide.
for
That's
Israel as the surrogate of U.S.
like I
imperialism.
said, that
And they have
relationship
lived with
is
Netanyahu in the past,
interesting, and
and
they
they would
can't
gladly continue
afford to
that
mess it up.
to maintain
I do have a
their
clip that I do
version of
want to
stability
play
in the
that's
Middle
related
East.
to what you said. So this is from a senator from Delaware. I just want to share it. So no, don't try to guess who it is, but this man is going to make a quote, and I'm going to do the share screen. I'm going to share the sound. So, all right. So if you're listening, this is, maybe you might see y'all might see the screen, but if you're at home in your podcast in your car, I'm gonna play it here. So this is just a little clip from a unknown Democratic senator in 1986.
Best $3 billion investment we make. If we look at the Middle East, I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel. It is the best All
right, so there we are. Now I spoiler, that was Joe Biden there, but it's not too far off, is it? If we didn't have an Israel, we'd have to invent one. He is that, yeah, like that's it.
It just lays it out there, like how is this even remotely controversial, and how can anyone think this is about the safety of Jewish people as a race when this is what this is.
Right. This isn't about Jewish students on campus.
Then he went on today. He released a press conference today where he talked about, you can have peaceful protests, but you can't be violent and you can't endanger Jewish students. I'm like, no, that's exactly what the cops are doing. You dare criticize this entire program, and the cops fucking crack your skull. It's insanity.
Yeah. Right. I saw that clip of this. There's a lot of clips. If I said which, you might say which one, but it was these two cops who probably weigh 275 pounds each on this one elderly professor, and they're pounding away on him. And they broke his ribs, his wrist, shoving him around. And this guy was not a threat. He was filming the police being thugs that they are. And then what's he get? They don't like being filmed. And you see the cop, one of the high-ranking cops point out, and then his little group of thugs go out and throw him to the ground. Or the female protester, she was a professor. They flipped her around, slammed her on the concrete. Like, these are the thought. Like, this is the free speech, right? You know, not one Nazi did I see in the last couple of months when they go around screaming, you know, there will be blood. They go out, they protest, they show up to terrorize immigrants. No,
These
one
fuckers
cop
shit in the streets.
laid a
Jews will
finger
not
on any
replace
of
us.
them.
Like, well,
But-
what are we doing about that anti-Semitism?
Yeah, nothing. Any laws? Nothing passed? No. What did President Trump say? Very fine people.
I have a
That
tweet I
was-
want to read
yeah.
out. This is
So,
this is a
all right,
person. She writes, "Those cops were brutal to
please.
me. I promise I did absolutely nothing wrong. I was standing with a line of women faculty in their 60s and 80s trying to protect our students. I've now been banned from the campus where I have taught for 34 years. That is Annalise Orlek, and she is the
Seriously?
head of Jewish Studies program at Dartmouth, and she was 65 years old, and the cops threw her to the ground and arrested her."
Holy shit. Okay, normally I'd be making a
Like,
joke. But
how is it that every day
Jesus
this
God,
gets worse?
like a gallows
It's-
humor
like,
joke.
It's nuts.
Like, I know. If I wasn't talking to any of you, and Jacob, and I know we're just starting to talk now, it's going well, but like, you feel like you're going nuts. Like, if you didn't like, hey, are you guys like seeing that? Like, are you watching the news because you feel like there's something wrong with you, and it's okay to feel that? Because I do talk to people, like, you're seeing bombs and children, horrible images coming from Palestine.
No,
But like,
finish your
yeah.
thought.
Oh, you got a clip. Oh, good. Please, yeah, play it. But like, it's just I can't, like, I feel like every day I'm going nuts. And you go on Reddit, and if you, like, I'll say basic things like Israel has murdered 14,000 children, and I get downvoted in the comments of like, we'll blame Hamas for that, and I'm like, I'm just it. Like, if Putin bombs a hospital, do I go, well, blame Ukraine for that? Like, that would be insane if I said that. You know, Putin is the Russian did it, but like, I don't know.
Maybe this will cheer you up.
I mean,
This
we've been going through months of
is
this.
this is a Zionist journalist
Okay.
trying to talk to students, and this is how organized the students and
Okay.
disciplined the students are. It's because every one of these encampments now has like a designated
Okay.
media liaison. Yeah.
Oh, someone's been in a picket line.
Genius.
Perfect. Ooh,
We've
well
been seeing all
done,
over the news all the
kids.
craziness that's happening on college campuses,
yes.
especially at UCLA. So I decided to come here for myself. Do you mind if I interview?
I'm not going to talk to media.
Excuse me, you guys want to tell me what's going on here? No, sorry.
Very good.
I'm not letting any media in the encampment, just so you know.
Okay, we're just standing outside, just trying to. Are we allowed to ask you guys a few questions about it? A lot of us just don't feel comfortable.
I can direct you to media liaison.
We're not gonna interview with you today. Not gonna engage with people that are gonna be pushing us.
Never seen anything like this in my life.
No, agitators aren't allowed.
Talk to one of our media.
They won't speak to me. No one will speak
What?
to me.
There's a desk over there with media.
I've spoken to them. They won't speak to me.
Well, then we can try again.
I've tried, and this lady specifically is an agitator.
Don't engage with agitators in this.
I'm just trying to understand what you're protesting. For some reason, no one from your guys' team will let you guys speak, and I don't know why you guys can't speak to me. And like, this is so
They won't
intimidating
let
and
you
scary
speak.
for you guys to be standing here. I literally have walked around for the past 2 hours just asking peaceful questions like, what's going on here today? Why are you guys here? And no one can speak to me. And you guys are laughing. I don't understand how this is funny. I genuinely wanted to learn from you. And I wish we could have ended in a
gosh, she's
hug.
crying.
That's actually what I hoped from this. That's my dream from all of this. That we could understand each other.
Are you? She's crying. She's actually crying.
She starts.
She's the
she starts crying
pro-genocide
as people
side,
are
and she's
standing
and
around
she's the
not
victim.
talking. Like these kids, they know an agitator when they see one,
Oh my god!
right? Like they're not stupid, and like
Well done.
they know exactly.
But she
yeah, how
dressed
do you do,
cool,
fellow
you know. She dressed like
students,
the
right?
kids, and you know, how you do? Yeah, how you do, fellow students? I got my skateboard in the shop, but I want to ask you, people, if it's cool.
God.
that
I thought I'd bring
Jesus,
it down
wow.
again. Here's AOC visiting visiting Columbia. That was on the 27th.
Now, for people who don't know, who is AOC? Pretend you're not into liberals. If I don't know yeah, I'm just kidding. What is really? Yeah. She's the one that called the marches anti-Semitic way back too. Remember
No,
that?
she's
Or
great. She's voted
pro-Hamas?
repeatedly
Now
to
she's
fund
back on our side.
Israel's military.
We've been seeing all over the news.
Well, it's not like
all
she
the
voted
craziness.
for Iron Dome and
sorry.
sent more weaponry and
Yes,
condemned
that's
the
exactly
idea.
what she's voted for.
Okay. Oh my God. All right. Oh, yeah. Thing two, before we, I have one question. Oh Lord, this is gonna get me angry if I watch some of those clips. Another thing too that was up from this quote too. The April 1st Damascus, when Israel, now we all remember, now this is the question if I'm being gaslit. Do we all remember Israel bombing the embassy? Like this happened, right? Because there's a lot of people who are saying that Iran attacked Israel for no reason, as if nothing happened with the Damascus. Is anyone even experiencing this, like, at all? A little bit? Like,
Yeah. I mean, we saw it, I think, too, with the assassination back like right before the pandemic. I forget
Soleimani?
which
Yep. Right.
yeah. And then like I just remember like there was a week where I think people were sharing memes that, oh, we're gonna get drafted into World War III and fight in Iran or whatever. And then it just like, I mean, part of it was the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, it was just like collective amnesia that we escalated tension.
Right.
Or
Well, yeah.
not we,
Right.
the working say, but like the United States escalated tensions
Yeah.
in that way. And then it seems like after a lot of these things, we just, I mean, obviously people are starting to remember, and that's why we're seeing mass protests. It's because we have been essentially gaslit for years now. Don't forget Venezuela, Venezuela, and then wasn't the coup in Bolivia also around that? Yeah.
Yeah. I just love how transparently obvious the lies are now. Like they're not good at hiding it anymore. And it's just so bizarre that like they're still just hanging on to it. I've made this point earlier in other episodes how like no president has ever been punished for their support for Israel. And so this could be a historical first for us. And because Biden's brain is stuck in the 70s, he might still be operating that way. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that was what else was I gonna say? Yeah, and one thing too, you ever hear like this is dumbness that like saying that like Trump was like a peace can't like Trump was anti-war. Even have you been hearing this dumb shit lately?
Donald the Dove.
Like,
yeah, Hillary.
yeah, and I like Jacob. Thank you for bringing up that point that like, yeah, he tried to start a war with Iran and North Korea, and like he didn't, and he was not gonna, he didn't surrender, he didn't give up Afghanistan, even though the war was already going to be lost. But people forget that Trump was like itching to have a fight with both of these like governments at the same time too. Like, no, just dumb stuff you keep hearing. But yes, I know there is that weird amnesia that's going on. Oh, dumb Bay of Pigs. Yeah, dumb Bay of Pigs. That's yeah, which is funny. That area. The story I like to share too is that I was down in Venezuela around 2008. There was this tiny fishing village. It was named Schwau. The name, I might have had some rum and kept shouting Schwau a lot with some cool people there. I make friends everywhere when you give me rum. So in Schwau was a place where it used to be a former, like a lot of it was a former slave colony. Like, they had a lot of the people there were descendants of the Afro-Venezuelan slaves who were there, and they, in that area, for hundreds of years, it had mud huts, no electricity, no doctor, no roads, disease, and a lot of disease travel in mud. And, under the Chavez government and the PSUV, you did see electrification, paved roads, concrete buildings, and there was a doctor in the town. The town's like in a mountain. It's very remote. That is probably the most pro, Chavista town on the trip. I went there for like 2 weeks. It was amazing. Where did the idiots who were trying to launch Dumb Bay of Pigs invade? Schwau. That's where they landed.
Wow.
The people who would give their lives for like what's going. Granted, there's a lot of problems with what's going on in Venezuela that we would criticize, but so they decided to go there. That's why they got outed in like 13 minutes by like the local militia with like old guns and rifles, and they had them all handcuffed. I'm like, they asked me. Not that I'd help them, but like, where you don't go to Schwau to launch your invasion, where everybody has like pictures of Chavez and like Che Guevara everywhere. But yeah, good planning. Trump's people are the dumbest fucking people I've ever seen in my life. But And then like that guy, I think they all got arrested, and maybe there's a hostage exchange or something. But I just thought that was kind of funny. All right. And another thing here. Now we did kind of another thing from the article that I liked here. And I'll read this off. Israelis themselves have not found, despite economic growth, a peaceful land of milk and honey. Marxists oppose the Zionist plan to create a Jewish state on the basis of removing the existing population of Palestine, a plan justified on the basis of the Old Testament. The cynical reason for British imperialism generally supporting the demand for 1917 was to create a client state in the region, something the French later attempted to do in Lebanon. Thus, the first British governor of Palestine later wrote that London's aim encouraging Jewish migration was forming for England a little loyal Jewish Ulster in the sea of potentially hostile Arabism. So that's why I was going to play that Joe Biden clip, but Jeff beat me to it. Thanks, Jeff. So that's the point of it, I think, is really good. But Jeff, if you would, you've read this Trotsky guy a little bit, I'm sure. What was his take on the situation in Palestine, if you could give a quick rundown?
Yeah, so Trotsky was concerned about anti-Semitism and wrote, like a lot of Marxists at the time and before, actually, in the 1800s, wrote, well, the shorthand was the Jewish question. And that was about, everything from pogroms by the Tsarist regime in Russia to anti-Semitism in other countries. And basically, the response of Marxists, most Marxists, and the response of Trotsky was to fight anti-Semitism through workers' unity, basically. So, for example, at one point, there was a Jewish kind of, trade union movement that wanted to be exclusively Jewish called the Jewish Bund. And Trotsky was like, well, we need unity with the rest of the labor movement. There was Trotsky basically said that setting up a Zionist, setting up a country in where there's people already living, the Palestinians, obviously, and other Arab peoples in the region would be a bloody trap for hundreds of thousands of Israelis, hundreds of thousands of Jewish people at that time that it was being set up. Actually, this was a quote from the late 30s. So the quote is quite prescient. It basically has come true. Some people might be surprised to find out that Trotsky opposed, Zionism, if they have a superficial knowledge of Trotsky or whatever, opposed Zionism, opposed the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine. And I think that's a good position to remind people of. And it's very, very true what, basically the process that happened. Also the methodology that Trotsky, used, and, look into the left opposition. I really like the name of your podcast.
Why, thank you. We actually didn't come up with it in case some people get confused, but thank you, Jeff.
Left opposition led by Trotsky and others was incredibly useful as a way to not fall into the trap of kind of what the Stalinists were putting forward. They kind of butchered, they did butcher Lenin and others' positions on the national question and became very nationalistic, including within Russia, taking away internationalism in all but name. And the left opposition, in terms of workers' unity, in terms of internationalism, carried through that methodology, the melodramatic way to say it, they carried the banner of, genuine Marxism through decades where it was being, where Stalinism was diverting it into different directions. And, the infamous Hitler-Stalin Pact, infamous Yalta Conference in 43 and all that, the Stalinists were enabling imperialism to a certain extent and, mostly on the defensive, but still they were enabling imperialism to a certain extent. And we're still suffering for that. And it includes kind of the approach of some organizations in, an uncritical support of, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, uncritical support of any regime that's the slightest bit anti-imperialist, anti-US imperialism. That's our people. And I know people I really respect politically, except they veer off into that world, that kind of Stalinist, anything that pecks away at US imperialism is worth supporting. And I find that really disingenuous. I just find it ridiculous because just historically, how many nascent anti-imperialist bourgeois led anti-imperialist movements then became fast friends with the United States, with U.S. imperialism.
Yep.
You know, simple regime change creates a client state, or all the little Israels that was mentioned earlier in that quote.
Yep. I like the slogan that anti-Americanism is a socialism of fools. You know, that's the thing that I like hearing because, yeah, like America, not the good guys. I hate to break it to the patriotic socialists. We're not really that great. We were good in certain times, like, you know, the Civil War. We fought the slavers, so good job, America. We did that right. 1861 to 1865, go USA. World War II, but very small times you'd say this was a good thing. But yeah, so I just want to bring that up because I get it. Like, you know, Russia, like, you know, there's an argument to be made about China. I wouldn't support, but I get it. But like, Russia is capitalist. Like, they're not on our side. I'm sorry. No, they're not. They're not. Like, you know, if Cuba was being attacked, we'd run to defend Cuba. Like, there's a socialist country in there. There's someone to defend. But no, god damn. But all right. Jacob, did you want anything else to this?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at like 1917, supporting the creation of a Jewish state in Israel, I mean, to some degree that was like there were better locations for a Jewish state. I mean, if you look at like the Greek city of, I think it was Thessaloniki, that it was a majority Jewish city. And I mean, New York obviously had and still has a huge Jewish population. I mean, when we get into the actual creation of Israel, in some ways, I think it's kind of given a new lease on life to anti-Semitism to some degree. Like, it temporarily provided a solution for the fact that hundreds of thousands, millions of Jewish people did not want to stick around in Europe after what happened in World War II, very reasonably. It gave the capitalist powers a solution to kind of deal with that refugee crisis without having to take on as many refugees themselves. But like, if you look at anti-Semitism today, I think, especially coming from the right, I mean, I think a lot of it is that's sort of how they get people over to their side. They'll talk about, I mean, it's essentially the old like thing the Nazis used, right? Dual loyalties of Jewish Americans. And so they'll like point to, oh, they have a dual American-Israeli citizenship. These people are not acting in our America First interests or whatever. And I mean, anti-Semitism is rising. I see, like, I've made the mistake of opening Instagram comment sections when I think it was the Chabad people were like tunneling under their synagogue in New York a while ago.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that should have just been a funny little thing, right? I mean, but then you open the comment section and you have like
the comment section in general is terrible. I've never been like, let me go to the comment section. Good place to be. Yeah.
I mean, you look at it and you end up seeing like literal blood libel alive in the 21st century. And like, that's the anti-Semitism that we really need to be fighting. But we're now talking about whether or not it's anti-Semitic to criticize the state of Israel for killing loads and loads of people, expelling them from their homes, destroying their homes.
Yeah, that's, you know, I'm glad you brought up the dual loyalty thing, because that come up, that comes up a lot. You can't be loyal to America, whatever. But so what, like, you have American Zionists, can be Christian, you can be Jewish, you can be, you know, Zion, because number one, Zionism is not Judaism. That you always get that a lot. Well, you know, because you have Christian Zionists, you know, the Christian Zionists, the fundamentalists who think that Jesus can't return until all of the Jewish people own historical Israel, and they think they can speed up Jesus that way. So that's how you get part of your Fox News viewership, the Mike Pence crowd of the American, which is like 25% of the electorate in this country. But the idea is that, you know, you're saying that, like, so all Jewish people, all of them have to support Israel, no matter what, even if they find the government of Israel to be doing horrific things. And a lot of, if you talk to, you know, American Jews for Peace, you know, they feel what Israel's doing is completely the opposite of their faith to do such a terrible thing to people like this. But I'm glad. Yeah. So thank you for bringing up dual loyalty, because that's always been a trope, and now they're reinforcing it by saying, well, if you attack Israel, you're attacking them, and Jewish people have two loyal. It's stupid, Like you can just justify any country. Like, I'm Italian. I don't. If Italy is a fact. If Italy started bombing another country and people were protesting it, I wouldn't call it anti-Italian discrimination. Because it's not. It's a government. Governments do stuff, but. So all right, thank you for bringing that up. And this quote right here, I got another one. We're getting close to here. This is close to the end, and this is the part. The CWI has argued that the rotten dictatorial Arab regimes need to be overthrown, as well as the ruling class in Israel and the elite in the Palestine territories. A socialist confederation of the Middle East on a free and equal basis will need to be built, with all the resources and a democratic control of workers and the poor. I've seen a lot of left groups always talk about the Socialist Federation. Like, I think that's like 100% of them. Could you maybe just explain a little bit what the Socialist Confederation of the Middle East would be, what it would look like? I mean, obviously, we're not Stalinists, so we don't believe you can have socialism in one country. But, what would the Socialist Confederation look like? How would it operate? If you could explain that for a little bit.
Well, I mean, it's the whole concept is rooted in, at least for CWI, and I assume for other groups as well, there's no solution under capitalism to the current, invasion of Gaza, occupation of other parts of Palestine.
West Bank, yeah.
And there's just no solution under capitalism. So the idea of just creating a state that everyone's just going to get along in, the idea of ignoring national, loyalties and oppressions, nationalist oppressions, and so on, is just a fantasy. So I think some people would look at, well, Socialist Federation of the Middle East, that's kind of way far away, kind of a crazy thing. But what would happen is, out of struggle that could take a lot of different forms. It could just be opposition to, again, U.S. imperialism through its surrogate of Israel. A lot of things can develop from that, including economic-based struggle, just to get to the point. Like think about if U.S. imperialism through Israel is forced out of Gaza, what would rebuilding look like? What would life look like for people under in a truncated state dominated still by U.S. imperialism? Gaza before the invasion was tightly controlled by Israel, again, as a surrogate of U.S. imperialism. So the Socialist Federation of countries in the Middle East would come out of struggles that had to, of necessity, kind of get beyond any kind of temporary capitalist reform. So, remember the Arab Spring demonstrations and so on. Remember previous struggles within Israel, within Palestine. These will lead to by necessity, if they're going to succeed at all, even on a limited basis initially, more unity among workers. And some exists even now. There is kind of more Palestinian, Israeli working class mixing, let's say, or I don't know the right word, working together at a certain level. It still isn't totally gone. So that, going back to like the national question, fighting for self-determination for a Palestinian state is extremely important, but it has to be a transition to a level of workers' unity that only socialism and the struggle of socialism can bring in the region. So basically, I think the way Marxists have organized at times in the past, again, the Bolsheviks, but initially, but then, in terms of just the immediate problems there in the Middle East, it requires a level of struggle for something that will go beyond, the capitalist repression based on nation states, but taking into account the consciousness, like Jacob was getting into post-World War II, using the refugee crisis of Jewish people from the Holocaust as a way to fuel Zionism in Israel. How do you cut across that? How do you, defend and extend the Palestinian struggle for self-determination? how do you take on a regime like in Egypt, a military dictatorship, essentially, that can impinge on any movement, and has already in various ways that people don't know that much about when you're struggling for Palestinian self-determination, for a Palestinian state. You have to have, I'm using this a little bit elastically, but you have to have transitional demands around national consciousness in order to get to the point, it's again a contradiction, to the point of workers' unity and the struggle for socialism. But I'm sorry to use the D word, but it's a dialectical process that problems can't be solved. Therefore, it brings up socialism again and again. Just like they buried it, whether it's through the Israeli state supporting Hamas at times, ironically, or whether it's the Egyptian dictatorship drowning the left, or repressing the left, or the Iranian regime drowning the left in blood at certain times and terribly repressing protest movements. Socialism keeps coming up again and again. So Socialist Federation of the Middle East just means it's a step towards a point where, like it also says in the article, people in the region have to decide what form different states would take and so on. But even that is a sort of a transition, kind of a step towards, what socialists are always trying for, a world without borders, internationalism. But even in the short term, infusing a movement with socialism brings up possible avenues of struggle and possible real solutions to things that are off the cards. All bets are off under capitalism. We could go back to just, a horribly repressive dictatorial regime emanating from Israel with its surrogates in Gaza and everywhere else, emanating from the U.S. imperialism originally. I mean, the U.S. imperialism has, the history is, hey, dictatorship is fine as long as it's our dictator. So that's not, the idea that there's a progression to somehow automatic progression based on idealism, based on ideals of, forget all the Israeli working class, forget national aspirations and nationalism, except in the case of Palestinian self-determination, which is extremely important and to be supported. But it's in a mix of the pressures from U.S. imperialism and its surrogate in Israel and the dictatorial regimes in many of the Arab countries. It's a fluid situation, and the only way to undermine the Israeli role, the Israeli state role in U.S. further U.S. imperialism is to undermine it at the level of the working class, and that's extremely important. And that brings up socialism, and only socialism can really unify the working class through and around national borders, and that's still got to come back if this is going to go anywhere. It's not just a question of idealism of Palestinians are right, they're just. That can be very, very true, but it's still a struggle against massive military regimes and repression. And like we spoke of earlier, the corporate media and everything else creating a narrative that's extremely ridiculous and false, but also very deadly.
All right. Thank you. Jacob, you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at let's say hypothetically there was a Hamas victory, pushes Israel out, all of that. I mean, if you look at how Hamas approaches international politics, there are lots of very strange bedfellows in there.
Yeah.
Like Turkey, Iran, both have a lot of influence. Qatar, all these regimes in many other instances will compete with each other. And so we have to really look at the question of if Hamas or the PLO or whatever take power, does that solve the overarching issue of the tensions in the region? I mean, a lot of the people that like this multipolar world or whatever, they were praising how China brokered that peace agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but that turned out to be paper thin the moment that any sort of pressure was put on it with October 7th and then the invasion that followed. And then, so can we trust these regimes to actually bring about reconstruction and peace, or are they just going to bring about another civil war? I mean, we have to remember, there were plenty of conflicts even between different factions within the pan-Arabist movement historically. And then, I mean, are the Palestinians the only nation that's oppressed in the Middle East. I mean, the Kurds haven't had a state of their own. They're oppressed by the Turkish, the Iranians, the Iraqi government to varying degrees. I mean, Turkey just recently supported its little proxy, Israel, supported the same proxy, Azerbaijan, and ethnically cleansing and invading and annexing Nagorno-Karabakh, the Republic of Artsakh. And that's just a continuation, right, of Turkey committing genocide against the Armenians, really. And I mean, there's even threats right now of Azerbaijan. I think it might have died down or it may have just gotten lost in the whole media cycle, but Azerbaijan has threatened to move against the Armenian state itself. And so really I'm not sure if the Caucasus technically count as the Middle East, but roughly in that region bordering it.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is a matter of how do we stop these competing interests, which are inherent to capitalism. Capitalism has, I mean, that's always like the propaganda point from the spokespeople of capitalism. It encourages competition. Well, the kind of competition it encourages is hyper exploitation of the workers, and then these horrible bloody wars, genocide, ethnic cleansing, seizing of lands, all of that. And so the Socialist Federation is really getting at, we need as Jeff was getting into, we need a way to cut across this basis. We can't do it on the basis of religion. That hasn't worked. We can't do it on the basis of nationalism. So what's the alternative? It's socialism. And we can't predict exactly what form the Federation will take, how much autonomy states will have within it. Ultimately, we have to leave that up to the working class that are actually going to be the ones that are part of the Federation.
So there's not a pre-made formula we can't just use and just arbitrarily shoehorn it in to make it work. What? Are you kidding me? You want to let the workers decide? That sounds like socialism, and I like it. That's good. Let me ask you this too. So the White House, Vice President Kamala Harris, as you might know, this has been dropped, but what is your take? I know Aaron and we talked about this previously, but what do you think would happen? Let's say the Democrats have their magic wand and they got a 6-week ceasefire. What do you what's your perspective? How would that last? How would that work out after 6 weeks? What do you think?
Well, I mean, a short answer would be it would be welcomed, obviously, by the masses of people, right? That's on a superficial level. Hey, we're not being killed, right? So that would be a step forward. I mean, the idea of permanent ceasefire is a really good slogan to put forward and so on, but I don't think it's the only one that has to be put forward. I think a ceasefire of a week or two would be useful, you know? Problem is, there'll still be intense pressures on the people just on their survival level, and intense pressures of where's this going to lead? Like, imagine your family, you're living in Gaza and you just see no future for your children or no future for, anything. That leads to incredible desperation and incredible searching for answers, but you're also just trying to survive. So it's really, really hard. So to answer your question more directly, it's like there's still a vacuum. There's still a huge vacuum and still huge suffering, just not the immediate threat, hopefully, of a missile, coming down on your head. So it's a great thing from that perspective, but you're walking in ruins. It's a post-apocalyptic nightmare to a certain extent. And the way, is they talk about like the bourgeois and the capitalist class and the Israeli capitalist class talk about, hey, we can't do a ceasefire because Hamas will regroup. Well, guess what else happens under a ceasefire? The Israeli state regroups. The U.S. military machine regroups, and the region suffers desperately from that regroupment. So ceasefire is an extremely important demand. It's just not going to create any stability, and any real stability or any way forward. I don't know if that's what you're getting at.
About that.
So I don't know how you're linking at Kamala Harris, but my link.
She was the one coming out with it. That's why I like to give you what the ruling, the political ruling class is telling you, because people are like, 6-week ceasefire is fine. Like, well, what will happen after 6 weeks?
Yeah, exactly.
What happens at the day one? they're just going to continue carpet bombing the rest of it. That's my
Also
thing
a
of it.
consolidation of like I was trying to say, like a consolidation and an extension of U.S. imperialism rearming itself. I mean, that's a constant.
It's just reloading.
Not much,
That's all they're doing.
but reestablishing a client regime even more firmly if it's true that they're pissed off at Netanyahu to that extent. Again, I question that a little bit, but it's a breathing space for the people. That's brilliant, but people of Gaza. But on the other hand, the machinery doesn't stop grinding on of U.S. imperialism, and that will be deadly. It will take a new form, perhaps temporarily, but it will be just as deadly.
Awesome. If anyone wants to add anything else, or is it good?
Add anything in general? Are we wrapping up?
I got one last thing. It's just the ending though. So I know. I said 30 minutes. I'm sorry. I never meant 30 minutes. Maybe we'll. Aaron's the editor, so
fluid on the radio.
I know. This is what I like about podcasts.
I have. Sorry. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
No. Just real quick. I don't know about you, comrades, but outside agitator is coming back as a mantra. Like the mayor of New York and so on. They're just loving that phrase now, and I just we all need to be outside agitators. We need like an army of outside agitators as soon as possible. I don't know.
That's a good podcast name, Outside Agitators. I like it. Jeff, you want to start a show? That's a cool one. Outside
I'm just
Agitators.
angry about like all the stuff I've lived through in previous movements, anti-war and so on. They're just dusting it off and throwing it at us. But by the way, one thing about the past, the 10 encampment tactic is a very good one. It was used extensively during the anti-apartheid struggle in the U.S. I was involved with that. In fact, was it today they rounded up some students at Dartmouth? I remember very clearly being part of a 10 encampment at Dartmouth for a brief moment because I had a friend that went to school there, and it's all but on the other hand, I'm not trying to say it's history repeating itself or any of that kind of garbage, because the repression right now is worse than it was. The repression against the student movement is much worse than it was against the anti-apartheid movement within the U.S. And you had made allusions to BLM and Occupy, and some of the repression under BLM was really horrible, against the BLM protests. And I've been on, picket lines where the repression was really horrible as well. But this is right up there with the worst of, response from the capitalist class in the U.S. against a protest movement. And especially given the context of campuses where they gave the impression, at least, or the perception of, hey, yeah, protest is okay at times and all that.
Yeah, I would say it's the students that are fighting against outside agitators, right? It's the students and faculty that are uniting on these campus grounds, and it's the outside agitators of the police, of Zionist thugs, of politicians funded by AIPAC. These are the people that are descending. These are the outside agitators that are causing the violence on these campuses.
Yeah, literally 100% of the violence going on is them. Like, they're the ones showing up in riot gear, billy clubs, on horses, tear gas. I mean, they were throwing that skunk water, I think. They were like spraying like
fireworks.
This is like this is what the Zionists were doing to the Palestinians, the same shit. Now it's coming here.
Yeah.
Now Netanyahu is calling us out, like telling us what we can do on our college campuses and what we can't. Like, this is the long, like, imagine if, like, I don't know, Belize was going like, no, who are you? I don't care what you think. But the thing is this, we're paying for Israel's bombs. Like, that's the difference. I think we can criticize you because my tax dollars. Like, I try to take the public transit to Boston May Day. And if you heard today in the news, I know for us local here in Boston, but like, they had to shut down the public transit. They had to do buses. It all went bad for the 300th time. It took me, I could have gotten out and jogged from Boston back to like the train station quicker. Then like we just stopped, or we're going 4 miles an hour because of slow zone. Like, our infrastructure is falling apart. And there's no one asked how are we going to afford to pay, it was $96 billion between Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel getting all that money. There's all the money in the world for that. But like, if you say, hey, can we get like tuition-free college or healthcare? Oh, who's going to pay for it? And now we don't have it. And we have shitty train service and, healthcare. But
By the way, the outside agitators I was referring to do exist, the good ones, of people in solidarity going to the encampments, going to the protests, and they're trying to like isolate the students from that kind of defense from and solidarity that people can provide. A lot of our material in ISG is how to defend and extend these protest movements. And one obvious answer, at least for Marxists, is we have to get workers involved. And there's a little bit of that happening, but we have to literally, unions should be mobilizing their people and so on. I think about this question a lot because I'm a union activist and I've been on the executive board of a union. I'm like, hey, we did a thing in Worcester yesterday, the Worcester Community Labor Coalition, not to call out that coalition, ISG is a part of that. So we get an email just before the event saying, hey, just only bring signs of your organization, none of that other stuff. And the other stuff, of course, was Gaza and everything else, right? So that happens. So it's like, well, I'm going to tell every labor leader I run into that, you all should be willing to risk losing an election. If it's unpopular in your union, which by the way, I don't think it really is, to come out for a ceasefire,
Sean Fain's
come out
doing
against
good.
Gaza, you have to risk that. And some unions, of course, as you know, have come out for a ceasefire and so on. But even within those unions, there's another dynamic. Like we had some people at the Massachusetts Teachers Association state conference, and Gaza was a huge debate. But basically, we actually kind of maneuvered. They've already come out for a ceasefire, but there were resolutions, including some that we put forward that were kind of try to deepen this, right, and mobilize the membership. And they kind of dodged that. Not kind of, they did dodge that with some kind of maneuvers, bureaucratic maneuvers, the leadership. But it's like, and there was a vocal minority against doing anything around Gaza. But the reality is that there's a lot of sympathy, a lot of support within the labor movement, I think, for the student movement, the encampments and so on. And that has to be tapped into, and that's outside agitation. Yay! I can't wait. If that develops more.
All right, and I could go on and on about that. Like everything you said, I agree with too. The outside agitation. You're right. They want to isolate this. The last thing, and they're smart. Remember, these people. These are PR people. They're union busters. They're architects of the genocide. Like. They're smart. They ain't stupid. The people at the top know what they're doing, and they're right. They want to always point out outside agitators because they don't want this thing to grow. As long as the students are alone, perfect. These are just kids. What do they know? Oh, look, a bunch of iron workers joined them. Oh, outside agitators. Like, they don't want it. So, yeah. So let me just get to the last point of this 30-minute interview, which has definitely been 30 minutes. All right, so this message is too long. Let me give... So these are just some of the things here. So I'll do these first three, may not come out. So 3 of the demands at the end of them. So, all right, here we are. The 3 things: the withdrawal of all Israeli military forces from the Palestinian territories, the right of Palestinians to resist repression and aggression, a mass Palestinian struggle to fight for genuine national and social liberation, the establishment of popularly democratically controlled committees to lead the struggle with the right to provide armed defense, for the national liberation of the Palestinians and the right of self-determination, including an independent socialist state. Let me copy and paste these next ones. I don't know why Zoom won't let me do it all at once. Oh, good. And then these last ones here. The building of direct links between workers on both sides of the national divide. Next point, the building of democratic and independent workers' parties in both the Palestinian territories and Israel. For a socialist change to end capitalism, the right of Israelis to have their own state. For a socialist Israel alongside a socialist Palestine, with full rights for minorities, while recognizing that workers and oppressed peoples organizations will democratically negotiate and decide the state boundaries and forms. A struggle by the masses of the Arab states against the dictatorial capitalist Arab ruling elites and of the Iranian masses against the reactionary theocratic regime for a voluntary socialist confederation in the Middle East. So let me get to one of the points here, which is always going to be discussed. So the CWI position, if I'm correctly, the Socialist Federation, everyone, I think that's every group calls for that. So you're calling for a socialist Israel alongside a socialist Palestine. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, initially, yeah.
Okay, so how would that now? Some people would say, is like, well, why not have one socialist state, equal rights for all? Why not that?
So I think we have to look at, first off, most Israelis were born in Israel at this point, and so they see it as their home and they identify as Israelis. It's not like previously where there wasn't always that identification with an Israeli nation. And so we have to take that consciousness into account, and the sort of fear, I think, that if there is no longer an Israel, that it's going to go back to the anti-Semitism and pogroms and things that were faced prior to the establishment of Israel. And so when we make the argument for an Israeli state, it's more as sort of a way to get rid of those fears and try to win workers over to a position of being in favor of Palestinian independence, in favor of a socialist state. It's sort of a transitional step. The goal is to use that, like, we aren't calling for the Israeli state as it exists now to be that Israel. I mean, technically, some people would claim that Israel is socialist because they have health care and
we're not talking to DSA, so that's fine. Yeah, that's
but so yeah, the point is, like, we're all for the defeat of Netanyahu's government, toppling that. We're all for toppling all the liberal Zionist parties that say, oh, we're okay with Palestine, but then they continue the same policies as Likud and these other far-right parties. But ultimately, we don't see this as the final endpoint. We obviously see the Socialist Confederation as the endpoint we're working towards. And at the same time, I think one thing to keep in mind is that other CWI material makes basically comes out and says, I think most notably in an article that was written before October 7th and then was published right on October 7th. And it was because that was the anniversary of the Oslo Accords, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so we had an article in the works, or the International had an article in the works on the Oslo Accords, and it makes the point that once you get the Israeli working class to support Palestinian statehood, and we've built these independent working class parties, and they're working together, there's a very real chance that they will decide that they want a one-state solution. And we're not going to oppose a one-state solution with equal rights for all if that is the demand that the workers all together come up with. We put forward this demand to win over Israeli workers to an alternative to sort of the right-wing government and then the quote-unquote opposition that still oppresses Palestinian people. So it's not like a final position on what should be. It's a position as a transitional step towards, as Jeff was saying, eventually we just want to get rid of all the borders. And right. 2 states doesn't necessarily mean 2 states with these strictly defined borders. Pluripotent national republics are a thing. There are other ways to organize it besides just 2 defined states with militarized borders. The US and Canada, right? Imperialist countries, lots of crimes there. But we have a functional border between the 2 countries, which is not...
It's not militarized.
It's
true.
Fairly easy to go across. So, and the EU, right? There are lots of problems with the European Union.
Right.
But with the Schengen area or whatever it is, people can travel between countries. And so there are ways to organize things without these militarized borders. And we just want to do that, of course, in a socialist framework. And you could even have overlapping borders. So,
right. Interesting. Yeah. All right. I didn't think of it that way. All right. Thanks. Jeff, you want to add on to anything to that?
Well, I mean, I think Jacob did a really good job describing the position, but I'll just give a headline. We're against a two-state solution, actually, in the CWI and in ISG. We oppose a two-state solution under capitalism. We don't see that as viable. We also don't see a one-state solution under capitalism as viable, and that's the problem. So that neither is going to work. Neither, it just won't, even in the short term. Unless you're satisfied, and there's certain, the liberal bourgeois, they're satisfied with a certain level of death of Palestinians and at any time, not just after October 7th, So we don't support that. And the problem is, how do you get to a real one-state solution or a socialist federation of differing states for a time? How do you get to no borders? It's a sad, irony. It means acknowledging the effect of nationalism on working class consciousness and not having a utopian position of we're going to erase that overnight. It's how do you unite the working class, whether it's in the US with other countries or whether it's in the Middle East between working classes of different countries. And you can't ignore illusions of nationalism or in the case of Palestinians, an oppressed people, seeing self-determination as a way forward, in the immediate sense. We can't ignore the consciousness of the Israeli working class, or predominant consciousness there, or the consciousness of the Palestinian working class. We just can't. We're for workers' unity, so that our demands reflect that. But they are malleable, and hopefully, as Jake said really well, that they will. The word transition doesn't just mean it's not a static thing. They will transition into whatever people decide they want, but it will have, if it's a socialist federation, it will have a material basis for creating new forms of people living in those countries. Now, I sound a bit utopian when I put it that way, but that's really what it is. How do you make decisions under capitalism when capitalism is the strong state in defense of capital, when it's the imperialist conquering of markets and cheap labor and natural resources under capital and capitalism? You're going to create a little bubble of rationality and democratic decision making. It doesn't exist.
No.
The students right now, this is a bit of a stretch, the students right now are being rounded up in the fucking US and taken to prison for protesting, being charged, some futures are being ruined even as we speak. And that's not freedom. That's not democracy.
Right.
So if you're sitting well, if you're part of the liberal bourgeois and you want to, pontificate, or even some of the left that's not in a precarious position individually, let's say, and they want to pontificate about a one-state solution and come out with a very dramatic ultra-left phrase about what has to happen. I might agree with some of that actually, but what do you do? How do you organize? CWI has experience organizing on the ground, Palestinian and Israeli workers together. When I joined the CWI, the first campaign I was involved with was Free Mahmoud Musawa. He was a Palestinian trade union organizer, organizing both Palestinian and Israeli workers in the textile industry that existed at that time. This is in the 1980s. And the Israeli regime just made up the kind of thing they make up now. He threw a Molotov cocktail or something. It was ridiculous shit. But they threw.
What was the bad thing that he did?
He was organizing workers across
that was the real crime.
The national boundaries they wanted to keep sacrosanct. They'll exploit the crap out of Palestinian workers, but hey, when they start organizing with Israeli workers, you got to stop that. And they do stop it. They often stop it. And this way, what they did to Mahmoud is they just made up complete trumped-up charges and threw him into prison. I hear these phrases about Israeli democracy. There's no fucking democracy. It's apartheid. There's no democracy. So Mahmoud got thrown in prison just enough that literally he lost his mind. Literally, he was driven into a form of insanity by incarceration.
Solitary confinement.
By the time that the campaign got him released, did get him released early, it was too late. The Israeli state had neutralized this Palestinian union organizer who was an internationalist and understood organizing Israeli workers and Palestinian workers. They destroyed that in that moment. They can't destroy it forever. And that's where those demands come from that you were alluding to.
Okay, wow. That was good because, they did that with the Black Panthers. I forget which one. They put him in solitary. One of them had the record for the most time in solitary confinement in California. And he came out messed up. that is torture. Putting someone in solitary confinement
Yeah.
for that long, they know what they're doing, and you're going to come out like human beings cannot be isolated. We're not that. You will go nuts, and that's what they did. But yeah, no, that's interesting. One thing too I liked here was the end the Iranian masses against a reactionary theocratic regime. You know, that one of the disappointment, I used to be a big Chavista back. Obviously, if I went to Venezuela in 08, I was a big one. But like when there was, you know, a protest again, a big mass protest against the Iranian theocracy, which has communist blood on its hands. And then like Hugo Chavez came out, like and like saying like, you know, going against it and everything, which was a sad thing. You know, that's, you know, not every socialist leader or, you know, I mean, Chavez, I mean, might have called himself a Trotskyist at certain points. Other times he called himself like a Marxist, but no, you know, you can, I know like Iran and Venezuela have trade deals that mutually benefit each other, but you know, that was a big disappointment too, that you probably wouldn't be supporting a repressive government like that. But, you know, that was another disappointing thing too. And one last thing too about the two state in South, like how would this differ from South Africans who would say, well, I was born South African. I'm a white guy. Why should I give up? You know, I don't want to share a state with black people because I'm a fucking racist or whatever. But do you feel there's a little difference between South Africa and Israel, or do you think they're, you know, because they got around to a one state secular solution, but you know, obviously South Africa not doing great, huge inequality. The South African Communist Party sold out a long ass time ago. Like it wasn't working. First apartheid, then capitalism. They only did the one part, not the second part. But you know, would you say that, you know, would it? How do you feel this is similar to South Africa? You know, if you could maybe put the two together.
It's extremely similar and the level of the anti-apartheid struggle, not identical, but similar. But it's not, there hasn't been a solution in the sense of the living standards of the black masses under the new, under the post-apartheid regime. And there's still, if you get into South African socialist politics, this is huge. You know, the ANC losing credibility, the attempts to form workers' parties. It's not a stable situation, but here's where it is stable and the difference with the Israeli situation. South Africa dominates about half of Africa without challenge,
right?
Militarily and so on. They just dominate. They're not under, the region is not, a roiling, cauldron of war about to break out at any moment, even though there's horrible problems in many of the countries that were formed. Like look at Zimbabwe if you want maybe some inkling of the future of South Africa in some ways. But on the other hand, South Africa, bigger economy. So it controls the region in a way right now that Israel can't totally. Israel is definitely the most powerful state in the Middle East, backed up by U.S. imperialism, most powerful military state, but more precarious than in many ways. And the conditions are more precarious. And like that Iran thing, the Iran thing, oh, wow, that's over now. That's not. That was a symptom of the possibility of a wider war and just continuous war at any moment in that region. Whereas in South Africa and around South Africa, there are crises, but it's not the same dynamic. U.S. imperialism, oversees that part of the world in a lot of ways without much resistance. And the South African regime, post-apartheid, is perfectly comfortable with capitalism. Cyril Ramaphosa was a militant socialist labor leader. Now he's, extremely pro-capitalist. And so it's a different situation in terms of the relative stability of the regime. But similar, again, a different kind of similarity. And I'll end on this point. If tomorrow you cobble together a quote unquote one state solution under capitalism, you would have a lot of the same poverty and instability internally, politically, that you have in South Africa. And you will see South Africa back in the headlines at any given moment It's not, when I say stable, I mean in terms of militarily stable,
Right,
in terms of
not economically or
yeah,
socially.
not economically, and that will then in turn affect military stability and so on eventually. So if someone, I haven't really heard that argument too much, but you outlined an argument that, hey, it happened, they got rid of apartheid, and they have one state in South Africa. I don't see it as a valid argument in terms of conditions of the people. I don't see it as a valid argument in terms of the differences in the sort of literally geography and geopolitical situation of South Africa and the military situation in Southern Africa, you know, as in general. It's in that sense, it's different. The similarities are there's no solution under capitalism. And within South Africa, in terms of the way masses of the Black working classes living, it hasn't been a solution. And you'll see, and really, if you go there, I haven't been there, so I shouldn't say it that way, but I have comrades
we can see the news
there
and
have been there.
Things ain't great in Johannesburg. Yeah.
I mean, in January, I had discussions with South African socialists in the CWI, Marxists in the CWI, and the situation is worse than people realize here. If you hear about South Africa at all in the US, I don't know about Canada, but in the US, no one talks about South Africa anymore.
No.
And so to use that as an analogy even, or as a model is actually pretty horrible, pretty incomprehensible. But I can see the argument to a certain extent on a very superficial level, but it's like saying for this moment, people are ignoring some huge problems, but you know, technically one state, you know, and that's arguable, by the way, on the terms of the way people live in that country. There's still economic apartheid in South Africa. Yep. I could go on. I'll leave it at that. But I'm glad you brought that up. I haven't heard that yet. In any serious way. So that's interesting. Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to touch. I know like history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. But that's the closest. And it like there's not much modern within our time, but that was the only one I could think of. So that's all I have for the questions. I know. Did I bring up 30-minute interview? I know it's going on a little bit longer than we thought, but that's all I got for questions. Or Aaron or Jacob, is there anything else you'd like to add at all? Because I know I had this whole thing written out.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also important to emphasize that we don't need strict ideological purity when it comes to our willingness to work with other groups. We work with other groups all the time on the ground that don't necessarily agree with us on every point in the CWI program when it comes to lots of different things. But in general, we're willing to, when there are demands that we can agree on, which obviously lots of groups agree that there needs to be a ceasefire.
Yeah.
We need to divest the universities from these research programs that are making the occupation and all the killing possible. We need to end U.S. arms sales to Israel. We need to end U.S. military aid, essentially our taxpayers paying for those arms that are being sold to Israel.
Literally.
We can unite around a program like that. I mean, that's really the priority for what U.S. workers can do, is putting an end to our nation's support for Israel's war right now. And so we're willing to work with other groups. We can have fierce ideological debates, discussions. We're open to that. We will continue to put forward the position of the Committee for Workers International, but we're perfectly happy working in a united front. Awesome. We work with all sorts of groups in Worcester. We just organized something with students from a bunch of different groups at like Worcester State University, Worcester Polytechnic Institute on May Day. We organized a standout after the WCLC event that was like, don't talk about Gaza, don't talk about Israel.
Yeah.
We had a standout outside of WPI, and we had a lot of like student organizers that some of them agree with our position, some of them don't agree with aspects of it, but we all agree we need to bring an end to this war. And so we were able to build a united front around that issue. And I think that's really important, is I think sometimes the left gets really caught up on you have to adhere to every part of my political program.
All 329 points, I might add. In one deviation, you're a sellout Menshevik, right? Yeah.
And so we're very open to working with other groups. We're very open to, just building a united front because we need to stop the killing.
Yep.
We need to stop the genocide. We need to stop the occupation. And so if we can get over some of the differences to bring about that goal, I think.
Oh, awesome. Yes.
I think
100%.
I think you bring up a really good point about how, like, whatever happens in the Middle East is ultimately up to the working class of the Middle East and how they decide to share the territory. Our task here at home, the enemy is at home, as Lenin says. And so our task, like he said, is to get our imperialist overlords, is to break with Zionism, break with imperialism. And the way we do that is through the movement. And right now the students are leading that charge. And now our task as workers becomes to link up with the student movement and put that final, like, this really does seem like a turning point. Like there's no going back from this. If we don't win this, I feel like if we don't win this now, then maybe it can't be done. I don't know.
Yeah. I also, let me say, for people out there who are listening, we easily have at least 12 followers. No, it's more than 12 followers. We got a lot now. We're getting good numbers now, but
we're at 39.
We have to, yeah, that's only Spotify, but 5-star review us, please give us a 5-star review in every platform. Steal phones, download it 6 times, whatever it helps. How could people get in contact? Do you have social media? Do you have LinkedIn, MySpace, LiveJournal? I don't know what kids are using. Smokes it. How can people get in contact with it if you like what you guys are saying? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
I'll let Jacob handle that one.
Yeah, so we have a website, independentsocialistgroup.org. It has all the information for contacting us. It has archives of our articles, so you can read more about our positions on other things, because we have lots of positions on lots of things. We have an Instagram account. We have a couple Facebook pages for different areas that we're in. We have members in all sorts of places. We have a pretty big at-large branch with people all over the place, but very active branches in Boston, Worcester, Maine, around the Portland area, but even a little beyond Portland, and then also Rhode Island. But we also have people in like New York, Georgia, all over the country. So if you see us at events, I mean, we're pretty open. We have our papers, we have our shirts, all that. So we're happy to talk if you see us in person, but if not, we're also perfectly happy to have you reach out to us on social media. All our contact information is on there.
Awesome. All right. And I just want to say in closing too, I really just like what you had to say, Jacob, about, if you go on the internet, it's tribalism. It's just attacking each other, but it's a lot different in real life. I've always noticed, because, my first introduction to the left was the anti-war movement around the Iraq War. I sat with anarchists, I sat with Maoists, I had Stalinists, Trotskyists, utopian, regular small s socialist, and we all had the same thing: stop the Iraq War, stop what's going on, like stuff like that, fun healthcare, not warfare. That's why I think I've always had that thing in my head of like, we all mostly agree. Yes, we may disagree on this or that, but like you said, Jacob, we want the war to stop. We want the slaughter of innocent women and children in Palestine to stop. That's not a radical demand to say no to genocide. But I mean, now in bizarro land. But yeah, so hopefully we can have you back at another time. I had a good time. I know Aaron did too. I'm speaking for Aaron because we did. But thank you so much for coming. Maybe we'll have you on sooner than later. But yeah, thank you for coming out. And
yeah. Thanks for having us on, because again, the title Left Opposition Podcast, that's our lane. Let's do it.
This is good. Yes. Also, Jeff and I are going to be starting the podcast Outside Agitators after this too. I don't know what we're going to talk about. The name is awesome, so that's cool.
That's for when the podcast inevitably splits.
That is now we have to get to the downside of Trotskyism. This will be the last. We're going to go separate ways. Aaron, it was real. Those 5 episodes, I'll remember them, but I don't know. Your stance on, I don't know, whatever. I'm done joking. But
my podcast will be for the International Committee for the Left Opposition.
That's even better. Good. All right, opposition. Cool. All right, so thank you, Jeffrey
Yep,
Jacob.
thanks.
Okay, so if you want to head out, then and then Aaron and I will wrap up and everything. But all right,
Take care,
cool.
comrades. Bye.
All right, take it easy.
Thanks, guys.
Night. Woo.
Oh my God.
That was great. Wow, we did it.
That brevity is the soul of wit. Okay, that was like 2.5 hours long.
That was a little. Well, we started late, but yes, we did. So, thank you once again, Ashley. That was a fun interview. It is Eastern Standard Time. It is now 11. So
we'll see how that translates onto if someone wants to listen to that for 2.5 hours. I'll see if I want to like cut stuff out. I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe, yeah.
It was good. Like it was good. It was a good discussion. I just wish I was able to find a way to comradely push back a bit, because I don't agree with any sort of Israeli state, even like a worker state. I don't think they made a good enough argument. I think any talk of an Israeli state is a compromise with Zionism, and we just shouldn't shy away from making those maximum demands. I think any form of like, well, we don't want to scare Israeli workers. I think that you're falling in towards tailism, which is like appealing to the more reactionary elements of the working class. You shouldn't. Here's what the ISO in the 70s wrote in the chapter 12 of the book called "The Other Israel: The Case for Hebrew Self-Determination." The non-Arab nationalities living within the Arab world, such as Israeli Jews, Kurds, and South Sudanese, will be recognized and granted the national rights, in other words, self-determination. It's not only correct in principle, but also the only conceivable basis for attracting the masses of these nationalities to a joint struggle with the Arab masses. It's the source of anxiety. It raises the question of how the concept of self-determination ties with the full restitution of Palestinian rights. And so they basically say like self-determination does not necessarily mean separation. On the contrary, we hold that a small country which is poor in national resources, such as Israel, cannot exist as a separate entity. It is faced with two alternatives only: to continue to depend on foreign powers, i.e. be a stepping stone for imperialism, or integrate itself into a regional union. So like no Israeli state, it's you have to break with, because the Israeli state only exists on the basis of U.S. imperialism and the bones and territory of Palestinians.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry, you cannot compromise with that. That has to be
right. And and I get that, right? Like, part of me is like, it's colonized land. It's hard to do it that way. The South Africa thing, they did. I liked how they did answer that too, because South Africa had a similar situation. Do we, there's a black supermajority, there's a white minority. Can this work in one state? It did come out as one but at the same point too, South Africa not doing great under everything. There's still a large wealth gap, usually drawn by race, which is a true thing. But the idea of that, but like I said, two-state moving, the goal is obviously no borders, more porous, make it like an EU situation. I do hear that. But the Socialist Federation is very important to have it. If Israel was only 20 years old, I could see that, but it's been 75 years. That's a thing too. I'm thinking of as well. Like technically, we live in indigenous people were all over here. It's been hundreds of years.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. It's like my culture, my birth was here in North America too. Does that mean the indigenous people no longer have a claim to this land? No, I don't. I think they do.
Right.
There will be no, like in North America, we can't have socialism without land back, in my opinion. Right. And and these are similar questions regarding the national question.
Oh my God, land back should be its own. Let's we just did 2 hours. So I know land back is something we should discuss, because that's been interesting. That's new. I haven't heard much of that until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I've heard wild differences on what land back is.
It really depends on who you talk to. The most extreme, the most extreme versions is like all white people get kicked out of North America. I was like, oh, come
Right.
on. Like that. No.
That might be alienating for
Um,
some, you know.
I'll send you a
that's
link. His name is Nick Estes.
okay.
He's an indigenous Marxist.
Okay.
He's the one that most people go to.
Ooh, okay. Let me copy and paste that. All right. Yeah, if we should do a land back would be
Red Nation Rising. Yeah, we should read his books.
Do you think? Honestly, I don't know. I've heard of it. But do you think it'd come on the show?
Oh my God, I'd have to read his books and like really become an expert.
You got to be a Doug. We need a Doug. All right. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we could probably get Doug to read it in 30 minutes.
Oh
but...
yeah, he wrote a really good book on Standing Rock.
Ooh, all right.
Yeah,
we got a new episode there. All right, awesome. I like I said, as long as the 2 states was towards a 1 state, like if it was just stopping there and we're gonna be good, I'm like, I don't know, but I understand that, but it's up to the people there to do it. It's just, I mean, Israel right now, the majority wants to escalate. Like this war hasn't been brutal enough for sadly a majority of Israelis. That's scary to me. And I don't know, that's, I mean, is it utopian to think 1 state immediately? I don't know. I'm hedging my bet. I'm not saying anything because I'm in the process, because at one point I was all in favor of 2 state, then 1 state. And now I don't know. I see merits in everything, because I'm, that's just me. But, yeah, I know, for example, other groups are very hostile to any kind of 2 state.
I'll send this to I think MWG is very much orthodox. 1 state, 1 democratic worker state with equal rights across the board.
Yeah. I mean, eventually the 2 states would merge into one.
As part of a socialist federation in the Middle East. Yeah.
Right. Because I mean, Palestine's tiny, like I think Jeff brought that up too. Like, resource poor. They cannot, I mean, yeah. Cuba's resource poor, and it's been a miracle for that long, but I mean, it's the desert. There's even less there for them to work on. So, all right.
So I think Nick Estes might be our best bet. Also, there is a Métis. Do you know who the Métis Nation are?
No. You're really good at this stuff. I'm just noticing Canadian comrades much better on this stuff than we are, because indigenous people have been largely eradicated thanks to the United States, and
Yeah, I mean, not much better, but in terms of like a voice and political power, indigenous people do have a little bit more here in Canada. So
that's one thing it seems honestly much bigger. Also, a lot more racism towards Native Americans. Would you say? Because I was like, Canadians were super nice because I'm a white guy.
Our indigenous are like your black people, essentially.
Okay. All right. Good way to describe it.
In terms of like how they're treated by the cops and stuff.
Yay, racism. Yeah. Great. Good God. Oh, that's good. All right. Have we done it today? Have we made it? Is this an episode? I think we have an episode. I think we did one.
I think so.
I think we did. Aaron, thank you for accompanying me on this journey. This was great.
All right. Yeah. I'm tired. I have to go to bed.
Same here. All right, comrade. Thanks, man. I'll see you around.
All right. Bye.
Bye.